Years of defining Canada in terms of progressive woke ideology has produced a cohort of Canadian men who are meek, emasculated, and thoroughly domesticated. Right? These are men who have no real sense of internal confidence in who they are, in their own values and principles, a willingness to stand up for what's right, for what those values and principles are, to oppose authority when authority goes off the rails or when it becomes tyrannical. All of this has been kind of bred out of a generation or so of Canadian men. Not all Canadian men, but a hell of a lot of them, right? And so they compensate for this personal weakness and this emasculation and this lack of a sense of power and authority by aligning themselves with the authority of the state, right? So I can't feel powerful and authoritative internally because I've been convinced that that makes me a bad man. That's toxic masculinity and stuff. So in order to feel that, I align myself with external sources of power and authority, and then I can experience by saying I'm on that side, that they represent me, that I'm somehow identified with them. I can experience power and authority and strength and virtue vicariously through those institutions, the institutions of the state. And we're seeing this at the moment in great detail as a result of the prosecution, some would say persecution, political persecution, of Tamara Lich and Barber, who were involved in organizing the trucker protest in Ottawa, the famous Canadian trucker protest, admired around the world and inspiring people around the world during the global COVID authoritarianism that we saw. So they are getting sentenced. I believe it's today that they're getting sentenced. And the Crown, the state, is seeking 7 years. 7 years for this. There are murderers and terrorists in Canada who get off with lighter sentences than that. And yet these two people who've been charged, I believe, with mischief, that's the only charge they could somehow make stick. The Crown wants to put them away for the better half of a decade. It's clear political persecution is being done by the state to make an example of these two Canadian citizens and to create a chilling effect on dissent going forward. So the reaction that you can see from this particular cohort of Canadian men is nauseating. Here are some examples of what I'm talking about. Let's have a look at some of this. So the way to think of these awful, weak, shallow men in Canada is to think about the weak kid in class who would ingratiate himself with the bully. And so when the bully picked on the other kids in class, the weak kid who tried to be the bully's best friend would egg him on and would tell him to, hit him again, pick on him some more, and laugh as the other kids were getting picked on. And that kid would experience some sense of gratification by feeling the power of the bully vicariously. I'm the bully's best friend. I'm a friend to him. So somehow I'm getting some sense of power from him picking on you. These guys are that exact same mindset. That's what you're seeing here, right? So here's Henry A. It could not be more clear than this post. Fuck the Freedom Convoy. Both Lich and Barber must go to prison for a long time. And he has this picture of the bully in this situation, right? Trudeau representing the power of the state and laughing about how Trudeau called out mounted police to violently crush a peaceful protest of average Canadian citizens, right? This guy, all of these guys, are getting some sense of pathetic power and strength by siding with Trudeau, smirking like this, and deploying force against unarmed average Canadians. So Pierre Poilievre and a couple of Conservative MPs have voiced support for Lich and Barber, and particularly have called out the absurd sentencing that the Crown is going for, this 7 and 8 years stuff. So how do these weak, groveling Canadian men respond to that? Well, here's Tom Parkin, who identifies himself as a social democratic columnist and commentator, and he's commenting on these Conservative MPs in a social democratic manner, I suppose. And this is what he wants you to know about who he sides with in this situation. He says convicts out on bail get support from Poilievre Conservatives, right? Convicts out on bail. So basically, he's making no distinction between Lich and Barber for these stupid mischief charges and axe murderers, convicts, people who break into your house and steal all of your stuff. It's just basically it's the same for Tom. And the villains in this, other than the Canadian citizens who had the temerity to believe that they had the right to protest government overreach in their own country, the villains aren't the people persecuting these two for political reasons, for vindictive political reasons. No, it's the handful of politicians who are willing to stand up and point out that this is wrong. Here's another one. Rob Taylor. The max for mischief is 10. 7 lets Leech off lightly. Tom here. A mischief charge under Section 430 of the Criminal Code refers to the willful damage, destruction, or obstruction of another person's property. Easier to prove mischief than sedition or treason, but that doesn't minimize their crimes. Lock 'em up. This guy can't wait. He's salivating. They came to Ottawa to overthrow our government. In many countries, they would be arrested and put in front of a firing squad. Responding to Tamara Lich and Chris Barber are facing proposed prison terms of 7 and 8 years respectively. This Canadian man says, "This makes me happy." This guy, the biggest thing that upsets me about the Ottawa occupation during the pandemic is that people still call it the Freedom Convoy. It was actually the Freedom Convoy. Spell it properly, loser. Boy, that's an original thing to say, isn't it? Oh, geez, did he come up with that himself? Here is praying that Lich and Barber get locked away. Again, eager to demonstrate, I'm on the side of the state, I'm on the side of the government. What happened to Canadian men? Nothing says tough on crime conservatism like going to bat for convicted criminals. More like nothing says man trying to compensate for feeling ineffectual and weak, like identifying with establishment power and authority. I would love for them to get more than 7 and 8 years and feel they should, but I have very low expectations in that regard. As such, honestly, I'd be happy if they even got the 3 and 4 years you're predicting. This is Jim Stanford. He's an economist and some kind of academic at in the economics department at McMaster University. He feels obliged to signal his conformity to woke progressive groupthink by putting he, him in his bio here. He says these conservatives, including their leader, missed the lesson about how elected politicians are not supposed to interfere in judicial processes. A little thing called rule of law. If they were in power, our democracy would be in question. So the complaint here isn't that the crown, the state, is clearly engaged in an act of a vindictive prosecution, looking for 7 and 8 years for these mischief charges. That isn't a threat to our democracy, according to Jim. You know, the problem is that there are some politicians in Canada willing to stand up and point out how outrageous this is. Here's the Globe and Mail and CBC's Andrew Coyne, who always endorses the deployment of state power against citizens, reacting to conservative MPs offering support for Lich and Barber. Incredible. They have learned nothing. And just remember, he was massively in favor of the deployment of the Emergencies Act. Here he is in February of 2023 boasting about an article, a column he wrote called "The Emergencies Act Proved Its Mettle." So he was 100% in favor of the state crushing dissent using these extraordinary powers that are supposed to be reserved in times of actual war or major national crisis. And then in January 2024, the Supreme Court ruled that the use of the Emergency Act went too far and violated constitutional rights. There's been no mea culpa from Andrew Coyne over this. He hasn't said anything about it. It's because people like Andrew, these men who capitulate, who submit, when they see other people not doing that, they resent that. When they see other people not submitting, when they see other people who have the guts not to conform, who have the guts to stand up for their principles against the power of the state, it's like rubbing it in the face of people like Andrew, who are constantly kissing the ass of the establishment. And at some level, guys like this have some leftover sense of shame about being these weak, groveling worms. And so they take out that sense of disgust in their own weakness and cowardice. They project it outwards into rage at people who can stand up like serious, confident adults with integrity and character. And that's why they get some sense of gratification when they see government unleash the power of the state against these citizens, against people who are willing to do, who have the character and the courage to do what people like Andrew could never bring themselves to do. That's what you're seeing here.
This is going to get ugly.
Never okay.